Now we're going to the project resource management module, which is one of my favorite pieces of this particular class because I happen to like resource management. I happen to like communications. So we're getting into the areas that I find are extremely valuable. They're less restrictive in that they don't have a lot of scope. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of money associated with them, and yet they're highly relative and relevant to our success as project managers. So into resource management. We have 5 different process areas here. We plan human resource management. We estimate activities of resources. We acquire project teams, develop the teams, and manage the teams. It's fairly straightforward, but it's what a lot of us as project managers do all the time. And here we go. Plan resource management. Again, what do you think is going to be first? Project management plan. This is a subset of that. This is a section of the project management plan. So we're looking at it again. We're looking to make sure we're consistent with the other plans that have been put forth first. And realize we're dealing with resource management. You can guarantee that if a project is launched, before you have your triple constraint locked in, you're probably going to have some resources that are happening. This is where it's not always linear. We have to look at these one at a time, but you're doing things concurrently on top of each other. So, next, we have our activities resource requirements. So we know what our activities matched to the resource requirements are. I have to do this. I need this type of person. Again, we may be assigned people, and we'll talk about how teams are built here momentarily. But we think about planning the resources. Ideally, we would love to have the activity resource requirements already noted, already handed to us so that we can plan for these resources in an effective way. We have our enterprise environmental factors, of course, and we have the organizational process assets. These always come with us. They're even more important here because we need to understand how the group works, how the organization is formed and reformed for each project. You may be a project manager who is a contractor, like I've been many, many times. You may be a project manager who is an employee. You may be a project manager who is an employee but really doesn't have the title of project manager. That doesn't always happen. In any case, whatever the title, if you are functioning as a project manager, we're looking at planning our resources. Now, are the resources all people? Are they? No. Resources are the raw material of your project. You may have figured out what you want to do, when you want to do it, how much money you can spend. You may have locked all that in, but you don't know specifically who and what items you might need. And if you have, here's where we plan to get them. Like I said, things happen in more of an overlapping fashion than it's easy to explain in this kind of a program. So, we move on. Our tools and techniques, including org charts and position descriptions, which means we've identified or know what we typically in our organization call things and what their duties and responsibilities are. We have networking as a tool. Let me tell you straightforward. We network. I am not 25 anymore, but I am on LinkedIn. And if you can spell my name, you can Google me. I'm out there. That's networking in the biggest sense, the biggest world sense. Networking is valuable. And the reason I became modern and do social networking and talk to people out there is that I understand it. Because as a project manager, I have always seen the value of talking to people, of stopping by, having coffee, of understanding what their needs are, of expressing myself clearly about my disappointments and my thrills. Not taking too much time, because we are, most of us, in places of commerce, and we have responsibilities to these organizations. But networking is important. Networking is valuable. When you are managing a project and looking at your resources, one of your tools is your network. And the network allows you to understand how to manage the resources. And that's why it's here. It's a tool. It's a technique. It's both. We also have our organizational theories that are around. And these are organizational theory and theories are things that we have been widely held. And what I look at them as and how they function is there are multiple theories of how organizations act. And what you need to know is a little bit about all of them, because different organizations act differently, and different pieces of organizations even act differently. So we're going to use that and we're going to study that a little bit to understand that, because it's important for your certification, it's important for your understanding and your success of your projects. We'll also use your expert judgment. Again, no place is it more important than when you are talking about resource management than your expert judgment. Meetings, got to meet with people, got to talk to them, got to bring people together, got to look them in the eye, or virtually look them in the eye. Both are important. And our outputs, our resource management plan. Here we put together the plan. We put that in with the project management plan, and we use that to understand how we are looking at our resources, where we're going to get them, how we're going to get them, our process of doing it. Now, we talked about stakeholders. Here's an alignment chart for stakeholders. Why are we talking about stakeholders with resources? Because our resources come out of our stakeholders. Either they are our stakeholders, they're people that are intimately involved, that have a vested interest in the success of our project, the products, the services we're delivering, or they are people who can deliver those resources to us. They are people involved with the project. And here's a way of aligning those stakeholders. One way is through this particular thing. It's a diagram with how much information, involvement, authority, and approval a specific stakeholder has. You can do this. I'm not populating this completely for you on this slide. What we do typically when I'm running a project is put a big chart with this on the wall, and Post-it notes to say, where would this person fall? Do they fall in the middle where they're very balanced? Are they very involved with it but have little authority? Or do we need to put them in different places? But the essentials is just to look at this and start making assessments. I would say judgments if it didn't sound like I was judging people, which sometimes comes on a line. But it's judging and assessing the people, but not in a bad way at all. It's understanding who people are as related to your project. And so you look at the stakeholders and you try and build from the stakeholders your resource possibilities. Again, you've seen this before. It's a responsibility assessment matrix. We looked at it, a RACI chart. Here, we can use this as a way of assigning specific resources to different tasks. But it does a different thing here while we're trying to understand the resources that we have a need for our project. It allows us to say, if I have a task, who can I assign? Who best fits it? And these slots here with Janice and Lance and Don and Meredith, all of those can be filled with potential responsibility holders, their talent level, their abilities. Is it a developer? Is it a tester? Is it a designer? Is it a technical writer, a business analyst? The list goes on, depending on what your project is, depending on what you're trying to deliver. But it's at this point that you can start looking at it. And you might not have all your tasks yet. Remember, we're not necessarily have everything lined up. In fact, this is the part where I get shifting with some methodologies because the methodologies want you to have a fully realized triple constraint with some of the baselines already established. And my point is always, it doesn't happen in real life. In projects that I work in, they don't have all of the pieces in place. Things are happening concurrently, and you need to be able to manage to the concurrent realities. Meaning, you've been handed different resources, you're procuring other resources, and at the same time, you're establishing the scope, the budget, the timeline, and negotiating that to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks and you have the people and things you need, the resources. So, we use this as a tool. Networking, formally and informally. I have I won't call him a dear friend, but I have an acquaintance in the Pacific Northwest that I haven't talked to in probably 6 years. But he and I feel assured I could call him and talk to him because we have things in common, and I connected to him on Toastmasters and working in telecom and project management, and we both saw eye to eye on certain fundamental issues with project management and how we do things. Where did we connect? On a networking site. Now, networking sites are not the place to find everything you need for your projects. I'm not saying that. It's the concept that you need to network. Currently, many industries and many businesses, many organizations have internal networking going on through quasi-social media entities. It's something to look into. It's something to embrace. Do they always work? Nothing always works. It's an avenue. Back in the day, I used to walk through the building I worked in and visit people. I would shake their hand. I knew a project manager that I worked with that had an M&M's machine, a candy machine, at her desk. And she had it there because she knew if she did have it there and it was displayed prominently where people could see it, people would visit her. Well, guess what? When people visit you, you get to talk to them and you get to network. Now, does this sound contrived? I am a gregarious person, so I find gregarious ways to network with people. If you're not gregarious, and there is nothing wrong with that, all personality types are welcome into project management, trust me. You need to find ways that work for you. My wife is very introverted, but she tells me I could have a conversation with a, concrete pole, and I probably could, and I might even enjoy it. And that probably says more about me than you want to know. But the point is, I'm gregarious. She isn't. So she finds ways to talk to people in her own way, in her own voice, in her own way of networking. And she has a network, but it's different. In business, when we're trying to do a project, we have a baseline motivation to get things done. And here, what we're trying to talk about is that you develop relationships and maintain those relationships in the way that you find best. And use those relationships not for your betterment, but for your dealing with corporate assets to build projects. We're not talking about pushing careers here. And let me just make sure I'm not unclear. I'm networking always because I'm a networker. I'm suggesting you network in this context because that's what you need to do to be successful in your projects. And your network should be specific to that goal in this context. Here, it's a great way of finding people. Who's available? Who's not available? How does this person work with that person? I have a big personality. People need to know that going in. I don't hide it as if I could. But it needs to be something people know. Because the first thing I will do is be myself. And all that is a big personality. Other people work differently. Okay. Networking, key tool here. Org chart. I look for these every time I get into an organization. I want to know who works for who. And it's not what you think. I'm not trying to see, where I can fit on it. Because trust me, I'm somewhere below this chart. I can't even find me. I was always a contractor, always have been. So I've had no status within an organization in the terms of employee status. I have status on how well I can do my job, and my job has been as a project manager and as a business analyst. And those jobs are about success, being good. They say in football it's a meritocracy. It's about merit. You know, you don't get to be a starting quarterback in the NFL because you knew somebody. Same thing here. And the org chart is a great way to know who is where is what, and I look for them. Unfortunately, they're not always there, but it's a place, it's a point of reference. It's a place to look. What happens in this company? Who reports to who? I've been in some companies where all of the information technologies, IT, reports up into finance. Why? I don't know, but they do. Nothing wrong with it. I've known other companies where IT was a wholly developed other entity. Is that better? I don't know. It's just different. When you're talking about information technology in specific, and a lot of organizations in general, we've changed so much over the last 50 years that there are no givens. There are no, well, the way it's done in corporate America, that has no meaning. Because I've been with enough, I will say that categorically, by the way, because I've been with enough companies that even within the same company, you don't have agreement of how it's done. Org charts give you a sense of the structure and can help direct you to who I need to talk to and ask questions. That's why. We go back about networking, that you need some signposts. If you can find an org charts help you, give you a clue. Who do I work with? Who do other people work with? It helps you move forward. You'll see as I talk through this particular unit and my next lectures, when I talk about communications and risk, that I'm very passionate about that communication, and this piece of it, of the networking, is very important. And I hope you understand that it's important because of multiple reasons. One, obviously I'm passionate about it. Two, it's significantly important to your personal success. And three, it's important if you want your certification to understand how this communication stuff works. Because A, there are questions on the test for it. But number two, understanding the test and how the test is contrived, created, and administered is important to understand some of this material. It all will fit together. So, our roles and responsibilities. Now, they can be part of the project resource management plan. If you know you need certain roles, certain specific entities, a developer, a designer, a tester, you need a general contractor, a plumber, an electrician, a contractor that does concrete. Name a project that we could talk about. In my earlier lectures, I talked about cleaning my garage and how would I do that. If I needed to hire somebody, I would want to have a sweeper, maybe a trash collector. If you saw my garage, you wouldn't laugh much. It's important to have an understanding of the roles and responsibilities that you need in the resources. When I worked for the Coast Guard, I did a project, or I did a training session to help them understand how to use certain tools to track resources. And in that, they were sharing with me, and I was like, well, what kind of resources do you have? And it was like Title I here, Title II here, Title III here kind of people. And those titles meant nothing to me, but they meant everything to them. And then they had this other device, or what I found out was a device that they mentioned. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, that's a crane. We only have 2 of them, and every time we have a boat come in, and I found out that in the Coast Guard they do call them boats, so don't get mad at me if you're in the Navy. If we have a boat come in, we need to have that crane to be able to do certain work. So they identified it as a resource category, titled it, named it, had a number on it so it was unique, and we used it. Now, I tell that silly story to make you understand that everything can be a resource. If it is a resource, something you need that's unique, that you have to bring in, that you can wrap language around to tell us that you do. If you need a 3-ring binder to do a report, it's a resource. It may not be a category 1 high thing, but it's a resource. Thinking in that detail is the job of the project manager. Keep that in mind. We have titles that are important in certain organizations. Titles are, as a contractor, you'll look at me and you'll see me kind of nodding my head going, titles. Some people are title-centric. And one of the things I do when I walk into an organization is to figure out who's title-centric and who's not. You know, some people, if I call them the wrong title, oh, you're a project manager. No, I'm a project manager 3. Okay, that's fine. I personally am not title-centric, being a contractor. Some people are. You are in Rome. Do what Rome does. Be mindful of people's titles, their understanding of the titles, what the titles mean, because they don't always mean what you think they mean, and move forward with that. I've known people that were project manager 3s who have never managed a project in their life. It's a way of paying people in some organizations, and it's simply a HR title. Nothing wrong with that. It just is a fact to be aware of, and I mention it so that you can be successful in managing projects, not anything else. So, titles are important. Listen to them, note them, use them as appropriate. Role needs to be functional. If I note a role in a document for a project, I want to make it very functional. If I need a developer, it's not I need a developer. It's I need a C++ developer who can do web development on a Android device in an agile environment. That's pretty detailed. It's also maybe nonsense to some people. Maybe nonsense, period. But the idea is be detailed. Think about what you need, where you are, what you're doing, what the project is, and be functional with it. I had a requirement. I talked to someone in the last month who wanted to put me up for a position, but they said they need to be bilingual. I said, which 2 languages? I know Latin. And they said, you know Latin? I said, well, I know Pig Latin. And they laughed at me. But they needed specific languages that they were talking about, one of which was English, so I was halfway there, but I didn't get the whole way there. And this was someone I worked with a lot, and we had a good time with it. But the point is that if you need something in your project and you know it going in, note it in the roles and responsibilities. If you need someone who speaks a foreign language, then put it out there. How else are you going to get it or remember it? Right? You need the responsibilities to understand the skill set needed. The responsibilities are key. If you don't understand those responsibilities, So the role may have a title. The responsibilities are their duties. What are they going to do? For instance, a question I asked the resource when he said, I need bilingual. I said, well, am I going to be translating in person or in writing? And they looked at me and they said, good question. Think about it. We have lots of programs that are very smart these days that can take a foreign language and take my email in English and translate it to a different language and it be reasonably correct. I'll never say perfectly correct because I will never say that. But if I had to talk to someone in a foreign language, I would be in trouble. My only foreign language is New Testament Greek, and you don't speak that very often. So keying in the roles, the responsibilities, and making sure that they're understood is an important part of listing these things if it's part of your plan. If years of experience are they less important than capability? Are they more important than capability? It's a different thing. How much do you want them to know? In early years of experience were negligible. Later years that in my work, it's just a different, it's a quagmire. It's a mess. But if you need years of experience for a reason, then note it. If you need capability, then note it. But make sure you understand what you're trying to accomplish with that role, responsibility of that person. Because you may find out that you don't have the right fit. It's a piece of the puzzle. Don't make it the whole puzzle. I've known people, and today we tend to have a lot of folks that will look at specific pieces of a requirement. I'm requiring a person to be XYZ. And yes, I work as a contractor. I see literally hundreds of requirements every week, literally. And I have to go through those. Well, there are people who are manifesting those requirements. Well, what do those hundreds of requirements mean? That means there are hundreds of positions that somebody has a project or projects that they need. So when I talk about these roles and responsibilities, I don't come from a position of knowledge. I love that word. Someone taught it to me one time. I'm not unknowledged about them. I have knowledge. I have an understanding. So be careful as you put it together, because even if you're talking about an internal position, I've known people that didn't apply to an internal position that was posted because they didn't think they had the qualifications. I'm not saying you shouldn't have qualifications. I'm saying being careful of how you note the qualifications so you don't eliminate people that are qualified in that situation. I also say if you have specific things that are absolutely mandatory, then put them big, bold, and in front so that it makes sure you don't waste your time. Both elements are important. And I think I've just jumped into this slide, this piece of not cornering yourself in your requirements. But be careful. As you can see, it's a passionate area with me, and I do have some experience with it. But when you're looking at this, keep in mind that the roles, the responsibilities are important. And when you're dealing with your qualifications and your certification, it's important that the role meets what you're doing. in terms of looking at questions. If you're asked questions, look for how to answer it according to the qualifications that they're noting, because that can be something that they will put in that kind of test. Now, organizational theories. We're going to talk about 4 here. We have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have Hertzberg's motivational theory, McClellan's achievement theory, and McGregors' theory XY. We're going to talk about those. I'm not going to tell you everything is pertinent to every situation, but the idea here is there are some heavy thinkers that have thought through this, observed organizations, and they've come up with things. Now, from a certification standpoint, you need to look and know and understand the differences of these organizational theories, because there will be some questions on this for your certification. From a practical standpoint, you need to understand what these are and be able to recognize them. And if they're helpful, if they're pertinent, if you recognize them within the environment they're in, then you have some handles, some ways of discussing the behaviors that you see. Because these organizational theories mean nothing to a project manager unless you can use them to be more successful in your project. So let's go through them briefly. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what Maslow basically purports and says that each of us has a hierarchy of needs. And yes, project managers borrowed this from psychology. Project managers will borrow anything from anywhere if it helps us be successful in managing a project and bringing it in on time, on budget, and on scope. I can't say that enough. So yes, we borrowed some things in talking about Maslow. Maslow says this is our hierarchy. The bottom of this pyramid, or triangle, if you will, it's displayed different ways, different places, and is your physiological. So if your physiological needs are not met, what Maslow submits is that you won't look to be safe. You won't look for safety until your physiological needs are met. What are physiological needs? You need food. You need warmth. You need shelter. Something like that. Then you look for safety. So maybe it's food and then it's safety, and these are connected. And then you need to belong. Think about communities. Gives us a sense of belonging. Why social media works so well is it gives people who are seeking that belonging a place for it. It fulfills that need. If there was no need, there would be no fulfilling. That's part of the psychological idea here. It moves to belonging, to esteem, which basically means we feel good about ourselves. And then at the top of this needs pyramid is this self-actualization. Yes, you heard a little sarcasm in there, and I don't mean to demean it at all. It's a well heard of set of information. And the idea here is twofold. For certification, understand what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are. And understand how it permeates some people's thinking about, well, you can't possibly be self-actualized if you're on the, living on your own or living unfulfilled in some, you don't have a sense of belonging or you have no self-esteem. There's a lot of reverse engineering of this, which has been categorically proven to be untrue, frankly. But it functions in reality with a lot of people, and it is part of the certification that this is something that we look at. But like a lot of our project management materials, it's not you have to believe this and live it every day. It's a piece that may be pertinent to some of your projects that you work on at some time. But here we're looking at it for building your team. And the key here is that if somebody feels, I'll use an example. If somebody doesn't feel safe at home, it's hard for them to feel safe and work well. They can. Seen it happen, so don't tell me they can't. But it's a difficulty. It's a factor that if somebody doesn't feel safe at home, they will not be fully involved in their work life. There will be potentially some factors that you have to deal with. Does that mean you get them off the team? No. It just means you need to understand what's going on. And this hierarchy of need will help you get a clue. It's one of the things it does. It gives us clues. Most psychology only gives us clues. That's Alan talking straight from my years. It gives us clues. How we use the clues is how we become successful in what we're doing and in our personal lives. We have Hertzberg's motivational theory is next. Now here we're looking at two areas that create workplace success. That's what Hertzberg focuses on. He looks at the first key, which is hygiene. In his mind, hygiene is not being clean. It's being in a safe work environment with a steady pay and a stable jobs. That's what he looks at. He thinks that if we are, it's in a steady work environment, steady pay, stable jobs, then we'll be more motivated. The theory assumes that money is not our prime motivator. It is part of it. Steady pay makes sense. Job makes sense. But what he's talking about is improving a working environment creates motivation. A lot of what he's talking about in this particular mentality, this motivation, this theory, is that if we have better working environment, better, nicer, better parking, nicer cubes in our world. He wasn't talking about this back then, but a nicer environment, more creature comforts. I smile as I talk about this because most of the things that I think he would have said we need, we have done over the last 50 years. But it's, coffee machines, Coke machines, refrigerators, microwaves, toaster ovens, covered parking, etc. We even have things like virtual working from home. But the point is not to look at what we have now and bounce it off of the workplace of that this was created. It's to bounce the theory. Is money our motivating factor, or can we improve our working environment and have that motivate us or motivate the people around us better? Personally, it's a mixing of things, but this gives us a theory to kind of puzzle with. Is it, if I have a work environment that's safe and steady pay and it's a stable job, would I take less money or am I more motivated or less motivated? What does it do for me motivation-wise? McClellan's achievement theory is interesting. It focuses on achievement, power, affiliation. So achievement equals success. So if you're successful, then that is achievement, according to McClellan. Power is the influencing of others. So he looks at these two factors as very important. Am I successful? Am I influencing others? And do I belong to them? This is looking at, probably we all will smile at some of these things and we go, I've seen this on TV, I've seen movies, I've seen television shows, not so much talking about McClellan and his achievement theory. We're not talking about watching it on the educational side of the world. We're talking about, you may have seen this being demonstrated in our dramas that come into our homes and that, or our pads, on a daily basis. The idea that people want to be successful, belong to others, and influence others is a very, in my world, yeah, it's part of it. McClellan formalized it. We use it here in projects to go remind ourselves that this is what people want. So if you're talking to people, building a team, trying to get your project going, you need to understand this. There are times, we all have aha moments. We all have that, oh, you know, I read this thing and it said this and I hadn't really thought about it, but in this situation, it makes sense. And that's what a lot of these theories are talking about, with the exception of taking the test to get your accreditation, to get your certificate. In that case, you need to understand, because there's a question right there. You understand the slide, you'll have a question. McGregors' X and Y theory. In Theory X, labor wants to be told what to do. Management feels the need to supervise. And labor is not necessarily motivated to work. That's Theory X, widely held at one point by certain people. Now, Theory Y is, and pardon, I left out the kicker, labor does not want to work in Theory X. So they want to be told what to do. Labor wants to be told what to do. Management feels the need to supervise. Labor is not necessarily motivated to work, and labor does not want to work. Then there's Theory Y, McGregors' Theory Y. Labor can work with an end goal in mind. Management can minimize supervision. Labor is motivated to do what is necessary to work, and labor wants to work and enjoys it. So these are counterpoint arguments. One is saying that management feels the need to supervise. The other is management minimizes supervision. One is labor can see the end point and is motivated to do the necessary work. The other is just the opposite. So these are the yin and the yang. These are the one point and the counterpoint of an issue. Understanding that some managers come from one point of view or the other is the important takeaway. To get your certification, understand how this works. McGregor's theory, X and Y. Realize the key pieces of this. From a practical project management standpoint, what you just need to do is realize that there are people from one point of the view or another, and you just have to realize who you're dealing with at a certain point of view and deal with them appropriately as you move forward. Now, leadership and management styles during the project life cycle are interesting. What we have happen is early in the project, we have a directing type management approach typically works or typically is exhibited. Well, and that makes sense. We're a directive type personality, a lot of us are. And whether we're introverted or extroverted, and we'll talk about those differences in a little bit, but you direct people because you're trying to get things going. You know, you can't go to a ballpark with a bunch of parents and children and simply go, hi. You have to go, okay, you go over there, you go over here, and you do the same thing in projects. So it's a directive type of attitude. So you go, we're going to have this meeting, and we're going to have it on Monday morning, and we're going to talk about when we're going to meet again. Now, maybe you find out other information about the team, about the individuals, and about the project that changes it. But early on, the management approach is typically a directive, I'm going to tell you what to do. Later on, when you gain momentum, you start coaching. Well, let's do this. Let's be this way. Let's bring these people together and see if we can get some synergy, and you direct. And then it becomes more facilitation of fully getting the team involved with the stakeholders and the sponsor and the clients and that type of thing. We'll talk in a future lecture about the Agile approach and how this kind of understanding of bringing people together has been formalized, made more methodical in that approach. But it's what we've all done. Even in a standard waterfall kind of methodology, we direct, we coach, we facilitate, and then by closing, we're just supportive. And supportive can be, thank you. Thanks for not leaving me. We appreciate it. It can be that way. Looking at a sports coach that you've had can be a good model for this, because some of them fit this perfectly. May not. Looking at a teacher, a classroom teacher that you had for like a year, and see what did they really do at the beginning as opposed to the end. They may not have changed, but a lot of them do. Been around a lot of teachers in my days. And I know that they set rules early. Here's what we're going to do. Then they'll negotiate and start coaching behavior and, making more flexibility, and then start facilitating and staying in the background. And by the end, they're very supportive. So it follows the same kind of pattern. Delegation, an important part of what you're doing. These are things that may be delegated. Technical activities, of course. I say that, of course, because, I am a technologist, but the code that I've written is so old that you don't even want to know. I've been around computers since... I'll use the joke and then I'll tell you the truth. The joke is I've been around technology since the abacus was invented. The reality is I've been around technology since my father put a computer in a bank. The first bank in South Georgia that had a computer was my father, and they cleared 40 parking places and put a computer in. It took a building. They built him a building. It was magnetic tape and punch cards from square one. And it was a moneymaker because he was the only person in town who could do payroll electronically, meaning on a computer. So they made money. That bank was sold, has been resold, et cetera, and I won't go into those details. The point is, he was a true technologist. I just stand on his shoulders and understand the problems and interesting facts. But I do know that when things are technical, you need the latest people who are really on top of it if it's late breaking technology. But if it's not, you don't. It's an area, technical activities are an area that can be delegated, and you should look at that. Cross-train related work, that's all about things that we are doing that can be, if you have a developer who hasn't done any testing or a tester who wants to learn the coding, and I'm talking IT here, but it works in a lot of fields, and I'll give another example. But that's what we're talking about, cross-training related work, taking the time to develop the team. Why would you do that kind of delegation? Because it's good for the people. Shock and amazement, if you treat your people well and they have good things going on, they'll probably be more successful in your project. A couple of other examples of cross-training. I knew of a brick mason who had learned brick masonry. He learned how to paint bricks and lay bricks, truly lay bricks, not false but he could do it. He had learned it from his father, who was a brick mason, who had learned it from his father, who was a brick mason, etc. This man, when he was in his 50s, knew that he couldn't do it forever. And he had daughters, not sons. And though the daughters were very good at a lot of the things that he did, he knew that the physical labors of brick masonry were not going to be, and they weren't something that they wanted to do. They were not their interest. So he took in not one, not two, not three, but a half dozen young men who wanted to learn it. And he taught them how to do it. That's the kind of delegate, that kind of work that he learned how to do, the delegation, watching, mentoring of that kind of work. It happens in a lot of ways. Look for opportunities to cross-train. Give roles over to people that you are either can't do, aren't interested in. Other people are looking for things that are interesting. You can delegate as a project manager routine things. Routine things may be simple things like phone calls or scheduling or meeting requests or meeting minutes. They can be routinely handed over if possible. Sometimes those things have to be done by the project manager, but the idea is think about as you build your team, as you put a team together, that you can delegate, and routine things are one of the top things on my list to hand over. Enjoyable activities. Some people we do have fun things that we do within projects. If you just fainted, wake up, come back to me, start again. Are you back? Good. We can have fun doing projects. And if you haven't fainted again, listen. There are enjoyable activities. And delegating those out the enjoyable activities is a great way of rewarding your team, rewarding people in your team. So think about them. There are things that I don't find enjoyable anymore, but I've been doing this for a long time. Other project managers are the same way. There are different personality styles, remember. I'm gregarious, so, I'm the human PA system. So I can go into a crowded room and I can quiet it down. I can stand on the street and scream, and I'll probably have cars stop for me. But that's a personal trait. And other people have other traits. Personal story, I know people that don't like to be put in front of others. I love it. I love to be in front of a camera in front of others. But other people don't. They get embarrassed. You have to know this about your team. Introverts do not necessarily like it, and certain people do not like to be put in the area of focus. So, it's not enjoyable for you, it's enjoyable for them. And you can find activities to delegate that make it make sense. Now, we want to work that breaks the routine is one of those things where you send someone to, you can do multiple of these at the same time. You can send someone to do a presentation for you if they like to do presentations and it breaks their routine. Perhaps one of the projects I did, I had to talk in front of a lot of people all the time and all over a certain state. And it would have been, I didn't ever get to this point with my colleagues that I could send one of them because of situations, but it was always one of my goals to say, you go do this one, you go talk with this group of people or that group of people, because that's what I really wanted them to do. And I'm, as you know, as you can see, I'm more of a teacher, and I like to mentor people. And even though I've done project management for over 20 years and have huge projects that I've successfully delivered, that's not what I do. That's not who I am. I like being a teacher. So find things that helps you break the routine of what you are to do other things for other people and bring them in. Things that are good for them, that give them exposure maybe, or give them a chance. Expanding things for others is never bad for you. And that's really the important parts of delegating. It's delegating to help you, but also it helps you in that it takes things off your most people think about delegation, they think about, I'm getting this off of my to-do list onto somebody else's. Well, the reality is it is good for you to do that, but there are multiple reasons you want to take it off your to-do list. It expands your vision of your team so that they can do other things, build them up. I mean, give it forward is almost passé, though it's not. But it's the idea of having that concept. And I'm not keeping everything on my agenda because it makes me look important. I'm more important if I'm overworked, kind of concept. Known people like that. Delegation is how you are successful as a project manager without all the other stuff that I said. Delegate. There's too much on your plate anyway. Delegate with authority and with kindness and with thought is the part I like to bring. But you need to delegate. You need to find delegation points and reasons to do it. Now, things that shouldn't be delegated. And yes, I closed down a little bit to look at this because I want to look at this and you need to look at this. What we're seeing here, this particular area, you don't evaluate or rank team members and delegate that. Someone else is not going to do that. That's your job. If you're going to say this person is better than that person, that's you saying it. You're the project manager. You're the person in charge. What I always say when I run a project is the project success or failure is on my shoulders. If I can't figure out how to make it work, it's still on my shoulders. When you talk about evaluating and ranking team members, that has to be on your shoulders. The long-term strategic planning has to be on your shoulders. You cannot delegate that. You cannot delegate the important activities, monitoring when things are going to be delivered. I mean, you can ask people to give you updates, but that's not the same thing as monitoring it. You don't wait till something blows up and then go, why didn't I hear about it? You should be hearing about things always and every day and touching base with people. We have too many ways to communicate now. Too many. And I mean that in so many ways. We have phones and we have email, we have text, we have all kinds of ways. So you need to be involved with the extremely important activities. You should be rewarding teammates, team members, people you work with. Don't delegate that without, this is one where I'll go, there can be times when you want someone else to hand over the trophy, but your presence is necessary. Your thoughts are necessary. Don't be a absentee boss, if you will. Don't be an absentee project manager. If you're rewarding someone for doing something good, they need to know that it came from you. You don't need to take credit for it. Patting yourself on the back when rewarding team members is not necessary. Being present and them knowing it is a good thing. You should not delegate that. When you determine policies, and I'm going to give you a good example. Determining policies, you should not be delegating that. And things like meeting policies should not be done in a vacuum. What do you mean, Alan? You shouldn't delegate it, but you should not do it in a vacuum. I give my best policy lecture about how I want to do meetings. Every time I take on a new project, new organization, whatever. But I listen to the feedback of others to understand how they've done it before and how the organization may look at it. And this is everything from meeting agendas, meeting minutes, how often they come out, how often we meet, when do we meet, where do we meet, how do we meet. Every detail about meetings, I look to the team to give feedback. If that's what a policy is, then you get feedback, but you are the final arbiter. When I look at teams, I try and set myself as a benevolent dictator, if you will. I'm very benevolent. But understand, if I'm going to take responsibility for the project and I'm going to be the one that's held responsible for the success, that we bring it in on time, on budget, and on scope, then there are going to be times when I say, this is the way. This is what this is talking about. Policy decisions, when you are responsible for that triple constraint coming in, you need to take hold of it and not let other people determine. As much as you can. You can't work outside of the company and the organization you work at. But you can exert your own power in the project that you're in. And you shouldn't let other people, and we're using the words here, so I better use them. We should not let other people decide personnel decisions in a vacuum. I mean, you're going to be given people. You're a project manager. Guess what? You can't delegate the choosing of personnel to somebody else unless it's out of your power. But you shouldn't choose to. Delegation assumes I have a choice and I'm making that choice to give the power to someone else. Personnel decisions for a project manager should be their choice as long as it's within their power. But there will be people, personnel, individuals, situations that you do not control. So just realize when you look at this slide independently and say, well, I shouldn't delegate that, then that means I should make all personnel decisions. Yeah, slow down. That means you shouldn't delegate it. That doesn't mean you're not given it without a chance to actually delegate it. It means that you may be given certain choices that are not within your power. It didn't get to you to make that decision. So just, there's a nuance there I want to make sure we understand. Not all decisions are made by the project manager. Management styles. You may have noted I can be autocratic, and that's one of them. But I'm a benevolent dictator. But there are types of managers, project managers, who are of that ilk, that they manage very, I'm in charge, and here's what all the laws are. There are others that are charismatic. I tend to be a more charismatic leader, and by that I mean I lead because I try and draw people around me, and I want them to believe in me. I want them to believe in the vision of the project, because that, to me, is what it's about. I try and come up with a 25 word or less mission statement that I use regularly in staff meetings, in project meetings, that say, this is what we're trying to do. You know, that helps. I try and run things with people, but that's my style. Other people don't run things with their charisma, their ability to influence people. Am I always successful? Not at all. My style is a reflection of my natural personality. Charismatic leaders can be benevolent or not. So it's not a value judgment. I'm just sharing with you, as you hear me talk, my honesty that I tend to be I can be autocratic at times, but and these do flex between different situations. But I tend to be more, people would characterize me as more charismatic. There's the coach. I try and be that. Let's go. Come on, gang. It was a nickname of mine. And it's a style that tends to, in this reference, talking about managers, we think of coaches in different styles, but we're flipping things. We're going managers in different styles. So the coach here is more encouraging, is more helping you move forward, teaching you the game, teaching you how to succeed. So the coaching style in management is more of a supporting figure than some of us think of Vince Lombardi or Tom Landry, or now I show my age, Don Shula. But you get my drift. It's not autocratic when we're talking management styles. Coaching means engaging. We have the director. I laugh at this because I've been in all these things. The director tends to like to push the buttons, and they tend to, well, not push the buttons. They want you to push the buttons, but they want to direct you on what buttons to push and when to push them. And it's a very difficult thing for a director sometimes to allow other people to push the buttons. And it tends to be direct, meaning they tell you what they want. It's different than autocratic, because the autocratic has a more feel of being right all the time. The director just tends to be directive. It sounds obvious. I've known directive people. They tend to go, oh, that's unplugged, plug it in, and they walk off. And you're like, what did I do wrong? And you're like, you didn't do anything wrong, just plug it in. They just noted it, they told you. It's direct. It's not an insult. It's direct. Directors do that. It's a management style. Facilitators, they can be of different schools of facilitation. I will tell you that. But the facilitator, I like to facilitate. I like to bring the different parties together and get general agreement or general consensus on general things. And a facilitation, if I were going to say what's the one quality of a facilitator, they listen. And it's one of those things I try and emulate in my personal project management, business analysis, husband role. I mean, you name it, father, husband, all of it is to listen. Facilitation, when I'm doing it as a role in a meeting, my biggest goal is to listen. So when we look at management styles, we're looking at the facilitator as being someone who tends to listen and bring people together. They are not a dictator at all. They are not a director at all. And as I said once, I'll say it again, these are not autonomous roles. We juggle these. There are times when if I could name people, and if I said, what's my management style, and I asked a certain person, they would say, you're an autocrat, or they would say, you're charismatic, or they would say, you're a coach, you're a director, you're a facilitator. It changes according to who you're dealing with and what's the situation. But there are ways of viewing it, and it's the knowing about it that helps you be a better project manager. Mediator. What's the difference between a facilitator and a mediator? It's different. Mediation, formal mediation, which I will talk about a little bit later, is something that people will do. But when you're a mediator, people are supposed to come to you with the idea that they want a solution. Facilitation, maybe or maybe not. So there's a difference there. Mediators try and find a common ground. And commonly, what we look at as in the mediator role and how we identify it is someone who's always looking for the mid-ground. Facilitators don't always do that. They try and keep things going, keep the communication going. They listen. Mediators listen also. They're very good listeners, but they're always looking for the mid-ground between two extremes. So they're not necessarily looking for the best solution. They may be looking for the intermediate resolution. It's just a type, a style. It doesn't mean they go there all the time. And this is not individually based. Realize it's styles. I can be the most gregarious person or the most shy person, depending on the situation you put me in. You put me in I do not like malls. Put me in a mall, I'm not a happy camper. I'm not sure how my personality would come out in a mall right now. Still not. But it's not my fun place to be. People are different. I'm here talking to 1 or 10,000, I don't know. But I'm talking to you. Management styles are about managing people and how you see them, how they see you, and getting through the hour, the day, the week, the life, to be philosophical. We have the mentor. I mentor professionally, sort of. But I teach people, and I do that. So some management styles are mentoring in type or in part. It's teaching. It's bringing people along. It's pulling people up. Not that they were diminished before, but it's getting them to a level that they wanted to go to. And it's hard to talk about it without saying that kind of language. But mentoring is about increasing someone without diminishing yourself or anyone else around them. It's about increasing them. Their knowledge, their ability, their sense of worth, their ability to do things. It's an incredible feeling. And it's different than coaching. It's different than directing or facilitating or mediating. But true mentoring is a skill. And, it's a management style. I want to bring people along. In management fields, there are people who will take people under their wing, so to speak. And you may see people like that. And understanding these different management styles is not so much for you to understand yours. It's to understand what you're going to see, what your stakeholders are going to have, what your vendors are going to exhibit, what your sponsor has. It's grasping information. And there's the visionary. The visionary management style is, they're looking over the hill. Some people have thought I was a visionary. I've never been a visionary. But you're so creative. And now, I look at the top of the hill. I can't look over it. A visionary looks over it. And that's the difference. Some managers can lead by looking over it. I like the over it defined for me. Remember, I was a guy who was in his 30s who had to go stick his toe in the Pacific Ocean for the first time to prove that there was one, because I really didn't believe it, because I was raised on the Atlantic my whole life. Now, it was a joke, but that's the example of someone who is more of a mentor, facilitator than a visionary. Visionaries are rare. They really are, because they can see over the hill when no one else can. Team roles. Now, we have a lot of different team roles that people will play. The initiator. They are the ones that get things started. They initiate. They are big on starting things off. We have the information seeker. They're the ones that want to get as much information from different people as they can, or want to. They seek. You've known them. You've had them in your teams. They ask questions. Some of them are very good at getting information, and some of them ask questions because of other reasons and various reasons, good, bad, and indifferent. But you'll see these types of people. Some people call meetings, the initiators. Information seekers, they ask questions. Information givers, they give information. They want you to have it. They may send you 16 emails in a day to go, did you think of, have you seen? We know them in social media especially. They're the perennial bloggers, posters, whatever. They have a certain type of personality that likes to give out information. I'm laughing to myself right now because it hit me that we have terms for them now because of social media. We didn't have that 5-6 years ago. We didn't think about it 5-6 years ago. Now we know them as, over givers or over posters or whatever the newest fad is for that. Encourager. In a team that you're building, you have people that are always encouraging. They're the encouragers. Let's push people forward. I try and be an encourager as a leader. But there are some people that are not in a leadership position that are still in that encouraging mode. They, you can do it. Let's go do it. Let's, it's okay. We'll get that code written, or we'll get that test finished, or whatever. But you'll see these, and I mention them only so that you start looking for this. Look for these people. Giving people a title, a role, doesn't diminish. It just gives you handles. And it can be handles that you share with your team. I mean, I've shared this material with some of my teams, and I've gone, and you're this, and today you're that. And we laugh. Why? Because we're communicating. And that's the important part. The clarifier. Yes, you said that, but what do you really mean? And what are you really saying? And let me state that again for you. You said that we should go to XYZ to get this piece of something, and they clarify. And they may, any habit, include any of these roles, both in management and team, that are pushed to an extreme becomes obnoxious, borderline pathological at times. Breathe. Most of us exhibit everything at some time or another, and few of us are ever that extreme. But you need to have handles on it. So a clarifier could be a good question asker, and it's not bad. It's just they clarify. They want clarification. They want understanding. Harmonizer, well, let's all agree, or let's all not, they may have issues with conflict. Typically, harmonizers have issues with conflict, not to be psychological, but they do. But they're people who want harmony, so they always are trying to bring things together. Summarizer. That's the person that stands up in the end of the meeting and goes, okay, so this is what we've done and talked and did, and boom, 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 boom. Or in the middle of or end of a conversation on the phone, they can go, okay, we've talked about X, Y, and Z, right? They may have a role in the team of doing that kind of bringing it all together. And some people really need that. It's a good thing. I work at all of these roles as a team member myself because I know I can go to one place or another and not engage in this complexity of conversation, of communication. And what all of these different roles seek is a different piece of it. So sometimes you initiate, sometimes you encourage, sometimes you harmonize, sometimes they're roles. They're not identities. They're not part of what you put on your badge to walk into a meeting. The gatekeeper, everyone needs a sergeant of arms, and gatekeepers tend, is this what we're going to do? Is that what we're going to do? Gatekeepers are interesting, and again, it's not a bad role to understand and use when you need to. Encourage if you need one. The devil's advocate. I love the devil's advocate. They're the one that always asks the question, okay, so we have a plan to move forward, but what if it rains tomorrow? What? It's not going to rain tomorrow, but what if it did? What will we do? How can we do our work? What if that tornado hits us? What if that hurricane? We had a hurricane here. What if the hurricane hits? Trust me, devil's advocate is a role that you need to keep in your brain because there's times when you need to bring it out. You don't always have to vocalize it. I will talk about communication skills in a different section. But and I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it now, and I'll mention it then. There are communications that only need to be made to yourself. Why? Because stating them out loud or passing them on to others does not help you be successful as a project manager. Being the devil's advocate can be a good thing at times. Excellent. On certain subjects, you don't want to do that. It introduces too much complexity. It slows the process down. And if that alone, as a project manager, and you're dealing with, scope and budget and schedule, you need to be careful of. So we also have some not so great. We have the aggressors, people in meetings, team members that try and push things around. The blockers who always disagree with everything. Well, we can't do that. Well, we tried it before. It can't work. Blockers. You have the withdrawers who, when they withdraw, they just, we're not, ask them a question. You have someone who's trying to get clarification. They won't give an answer. You have someone who's trying to harmonize. They won't get an answer. These are not the good behaviors but you'll see them. You'll see reconciliation, always checking for reconciliation, bringing back and trying to slam a door almost, and slam it inward, not outward. You have the topic jumpers. They keep flipping between. Having worked with some both children and adults with ADD, and having been threatened that I am ADD myself, full disclosure, topic jumpers tend to be the people that can't keep on topic. They can't keep on one thing until you've completed it. They have an idea. Oh, well, you said that. Well, let's go there. You have a pink ribbon in your head. Here, let's talk about that. And they keep a group of people, especially, from focusing on what they need to focus on. And if there's a lesson in all this that I've talked about, roles of management and roles of team members, it's your job as a project manager to keep people focused on what's important. And in a team meeting about a project, the only thing not the only thing, let me step back. A key thing that you should keep in mind always is the project. Are we reaching our project goals? Are we seeking our project resolution? That's important. Dominator. There are some people who like to dominate conversations. It will probably neither shock nor amaze anyone here who has heard me through these lectures know that I probably am not dominated by a lot of individuals. I happen to be a rather big man, and that doesn't mean a lot, but I'm not shy either. And this has nothing to do with big physical anything. It has to do with willingness to talk and say, yes, but, why, no, that's not appropriate. That's not the way to do it. We're going to go on now. Can we move on? Let's shut down the meeting until later. Can we talk in private? Things like that. I'm very much in the realm of not confronting, but not ignoring. Dominators tend to be a bit of a bully. As you can tell, I don't really play well with bullies, in a corporate setting or otherwise. I don't believe in them. I don't believe there's a place for them. I think they can be managed, and that's what I try and do. But dominators on your team, you have to be aware of. You cannot ignore. The PM has power, and we're going to look at what the project management power is based on and what types of power that they can have. They have formal power. That means that the project charter is giving them certain responsibilities and power that the sponsors, that the stakeholders, that the organization gives them. They also have a power that they get through rewarding others. They can reward people for various things, for service, for accomplishments, for having deliverables. So there is a reward power that a project manager can have. There's also a penalty power. Penalty power is just the opposite. If a reward is the carrot, then the penalty is the whip in the old terms of management style. Now, of course, we don't use those things anymore, but the idea is that there are certain penalties that you can bring when you're working with people on projects. Withholding bonuses would be one if you're given that formal power from the organization. Another thing would be to withdraw certain privileges, certain rights that they would have normally. Now, these are not illegal things. These are things within the corporate structure. For instance, you might have a situation where your team has a lunch planned every Friday, but it's not a formal thing. it is not a guaranteed activity. You might withdraw that if you needed to get things done and they weren't getting done in a timely fashion. That would be a penalty. Now, be careful as I talk about these things that you don't think that HR doesn't have a vested interest. And the way the litigious nature of things are now, you need to be careful. That said, the project manager has these kinds of powers that they may or may not either have in every situation nor choose to use in every situation. Just because a power exists doesn't mean it is the right power to use in a given scenario or with a given group of people. Expert power is the power the project manager brings. Remember expert judgment I've talked about for many lectures. Expert power is here where you are an expert at project management, perhaps in the industry, perhaps with technology of some sort. And because you are an expert, you are deemed with power. People will give it to you not formally, like writing it out, but they will give it to you because you have shown and demonstrated your expertise. So expert power is one of those things we get with time and energy and just knowledge of something. Being an expert doesn't mean that you've done it for years and years. It means that you have shown a propensity of skill. That's what an expert is. You can be an expert quarterback at 17, 18 years old. It means that you've shown that you have the ability to demonstrate it. So that's what we're talking about expertise here. As a project manager, part of why you are looking at this particular course and taking this and seeking a certification is basically to demonstrate your expertise. I am an expert at project management. That's what you're trying to say, and that's what's important here. We also have referent, which means if someone gives you that power by referring it to you, by having you be recommended, by you being in the presence or of a certain group or a certain enclave within an organization or within professional organizations. PMP certification will give you that referent type of power because it says you have a certain level of training, you have dedicated yourself to knowledge, and you are signing up for that kind of ongoing power, knowledge, information, commitment. Now, other powers that we may talk about: attitude power, commitment power, competition power, investment power, knowledge of needs power, moral or ethical power, persistence power, persuasive power, planning power, precedent power, and professionalism power. I brought all of these up so you can look at them as a group of different items that, when used and when you are thinking about why can't I get things done, part of that is in the power that you have and that you seek, power that is perceived as well as that you have. Attitude power, commitment power. How does attitude and commitment go together? And why are they a power? If you show you have a good attitude towards the project, you're positive towards it, we will succeed. Here's where we're going, and we will succeed. That's a positive attitude. It's not, well, we'll be going with this project until they cancel it. See the difference? Commitment power is very close to attitude power. But it really means that you show a commitment to the project. If you are the last one in every day and the first one gone, that doesn't necessarily show your commitment. Unless, of course, you're up at 5 a.m. and doing emails and up late at night, and that may show more commitment. It's a relative thing, and it is specific to a group of people in an organization because you cannot have this in a vacuum. Some people think that commitment means that you spend lots of hours on the project. Well, that is a form of commitment, but it is not the only type of commitment. It's not the number of hours. It's not the volume of your commitment. It's the quality as well. What do you get done? Are you getting your deliverables done? Are you communicating clearly? Are you leading the people that you have as a team? Those are other signs of commitment that are seen by a team of people and are valuable to the project. You have investment, competition and investment powers. I look at those as similar in that competition is bouncing the idea of our project against another, or our group against another, or our organization against another organization, our company, our products. If we're bringing out a product line or a service line, we need to think that that can be used as a power of influence and getting things done. Now, I'm hitting this word power a lot, and a lot of people flinch from it because they think that power is by necessity a bad thing. I've already mentioned that my personal form of leadership, I like to think of as a benevolent dictatorship, which means I'm very nice with everyone as I can be, but when it comes down to it, the project manager is in charge, and I like to be able to say, okay, everything well and good, but we have to do something, and here it is. Go do it. And that can be very good and very bad. And I try and take that responsibility and the stewardship of the project very much to heart. So when we're talking about competition and using that power, or investing in the project, an investment is like commitment in a way that shows that you believe in the project, and you are using that investing of your time, energy, resources even. Do you think that a teacher who buys markers for her class with their own money or his own money is not showing a power of investment in that organization? The students, the parents, her peers or his peers. It's an investment power. Knowledge of needs power. Knowing what people need, seeking out what their needs are, being aware and observing and listening to the needs of the team and the sponsors and the stakeholders is a power. It brings you information, and information is power. There's moral and ethical power, meaning you're doing the right thing. That in itself is powerful. And with this certification, we actually require it. It is required by the certifying organization that you commit to a moral and ethical power, and we'll talk about that in later lectures. But the point is, it is a power in and itself, in all that you do, in all that you're managing with projects, that if you are doing it for the right thing, for the right reasons, then that is powerful. You have persistence power. And persistence power just means squeaky wheel, if you will. Asking a lot. Now, I urge you not to use this power as one of your first lines of power. Some project managers think that being persistent is what their job is. They think that always reminding people of everything all the time is what they need to do. I have a pet peeve, and I'll probably talk about this again when we deal with in our communications management, but the pet peeve is that when people send me emails urgent, always, if every email you send is urgent to your team, then nothing you say is urgent, because you lost the power of persistence by its overuse. Think about children. When the child is there going, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy," does that word continue to have the same power? Now, yes, it can get things done at times, but not consistently. Like I say, it's not something to take out of your toolbox and say never use it. Persistence can be good in measured usage, but it should never be the go-to power that you have to do, you have to use, and the only thing you feel comfortable using within a project to get things done. Persuasive power, it's one that I particularly like. It's getting people to do things by, there are a lot of different definitions, and I'll use a couple here just because we all are persuaded. Commercials, we get hit by them on radio and television all the time. We get messages from billboards, from the sides of cars these days. We get messages popped up on our devices all the time. So they're all trying to get you to do, think, say, act in a way that they want you to do. That's the nature of persuasion, and it's usually done through mostly emotional means, meaning they touch upon your emotions, not your intellect. It may seem like they have an intellectual argument that they're trying to say, but typically persuasion is about the emotions that they generate, and the emotions guide that behavior change or that attitude change, and they use any intellect, any facts for their emotional value, their emotional impact. So just key on that. And emotional power is something that you can use, and some people do it very naturally. Natural persuaders, people who can get you to do whatever they want you to do. It's a power to be used, but it's a power that's very, it can be overused, it can be abused. So be aware of it. But it really is talking about being in touch with the emotional impact of what you're trying to get the other parties to do, not the intellectual. It minimizes, it uses the intellectual, but it uses it as a portion and only for the emotional impact of that, of the intellectual content. There is planning power. If you're a good planner, if everyone knows that you have everything lined up and put together, that can be a very powerful tool that the project manager uses within their group, within their stakeholders. Precedent power is talking about what has happened before. There are times in organizations when saying this is the way we do things is the way to go at it, and that's really using precedent power. There's a precedent for doing it this way. Let's move that direction. So that even if you want to reinvent everything, you should be aware that precedent power is powerful, and other people will use it as well as you to be able to affect things within your organization, within your project. And professionalism power. Now, professionalism is one of those things that we know it when we see it, and we know it when it's not there. But it's hard to put a concrete definition together, because in every field, in every industry, on every project, within every organization, it's slightly different. Now, professionalism is a very important thing to have is part of who you are, to present yourself as a professional. But like I said, that's different in different places. There are places within the Silicon Valley and other software shops where wearing shorts and flip-flops and playing ping pong while you're thinking is thought of as professional. Like long hair, beards, ponytails are fine. I had a beard and ponytail at one time while working as a professional project manager, business analyst. It was accepted completely. My outfit was professional, collared shirts, a lot of them starched. I rarely wear a jacket, but in that environment, it was not required. There are other environments where the old IBM, which has gone away, but the old IBM style was, a coat and tie and a white shirt, starched, laundered. That was what they wanted, the image that they were trying to create. Now, when you look at this as professional power, as in powers of project managers, you want to project an air of professionalism, that I know what I'm doing, that I understand the environment that you're in, and that helps leverage other powers that you have and other information that you may be trying to get across. You never want to go into an environment as project manager and be questioned for your professionalism for things that you can control, meaning your garb, your clothing, your attitude, your language. I mean, there are professional environments in which cursing is not only allowed, but is normal. And before you raise your eyeballs, did you watch a game this past weekend? Every one of those coaches is a professional. And on Sunday, all the people that are on the field are professionals. And I know for a fact that sometimes they do not talk in what we would consider parlor language, old-fashioned word, but meaning they may curse. In environments of other types that project managers are generally in, that kind of language would not be appropriate. When we talk about professionalism, part of the power is understanding what is appropriate and what isn't within your environment, and always be on the side of caution when talking about this, because you can make mistakes, especially if you're moving from one group to another, one organization to another. I've worked for a lot of different companies throughout my career, so I understand you have to wait and see at times to find out what is appropriate or not. And you have to blend that with your natural personality. Just because it's appropriate within an environment doesn't mean you have to partake in either language or fashion. It's important to be yourself, but be it in a professional way, and that will give you power. Now, the last one I wanted to talk about, because we're going to talk heavily about risk, is risk power. The idea of power with risk is different, because with risk, we're talking about the things that might happen. And some people have used risk power on the one extreme or the other. They're very safe or they're very risky. And they use that as an ability and a power, and they may merge it with their persuasive powers to say, yeah, we got to do this because everyone else is, the other company is, the other groups are. So we can take a risk. It may not look completely like we should, but we can take a risk. We can make a choice. We can do an action. So risk power is one of those blended. and it has to do with what might happen and people's tolerance to risk. But we'll talk more about that in the risk management portion. So, estimating activity resources. If we look at what we've done so far, this is a new process to this particular knowledge area, but it's not a new process to our overall methodology, our overall standards. We've moved it into this particular area, and we're looking at it with inputs of the project resource management plan, the schedule management plan, the activities list that we've created, activity attributes, so those details around the activities that we've already created, our resource calendars, risk register. Again, we've not talked specifically about it. There's an assumption that we've done some work on risk at this point. Our activity cost estimates. So we've looked at activity and we've said that we need 100 person hours to do a specific activity. Here we're going to estimate the resources needed for that. We have enterprise environmental factors and our organizational process assets. Our tools and techniques include our expert judgment, alternative analysis, published estimating data. A lot of times we understand things because things have been published, either internally or externally, from government sources, from industry sources. So we use that published estimating data. There are some people that say that if you are writing 500 lines of code in a specific language, that should take X number of days or hours. And those are the kinds of things you can look at when we're looking at that. And you can also look at, remember, how efficient our resources are, how experienced our resources are, and we can make judgments on that help us with this kind of estimating. We also look at bottom-up estimating, so the bottom-most rung, building it from a piece part all the way to the whole. And project management software, again, it's a source. It's a place where we look to see what is the algorithm of how that software is put together and how it is adding in the resources to activity and relating those and giving us estimates. Our outputs would be our activity resource requirements. What do we need? Who do we need? Our resource breakdown structure. And our project documents will be updated.